Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
The Pacific Northwest is full of old Indian legends, and it's not uncommon to hear a lot of ghost stories concerning them. I have one I'd love to tell you all. It's a personal story that has affected my family for generations. My grandpa was an avid hunter and hiker when he was young. You could not have named a trail he hadn't hiked or a spot on Mount Hood he hadn't hunted. He was a master marksman. Being part of the Comanche tribe, his father had expected him to be capable with a gun. During the second week of deer season, well into October, my grandpa set up a camp in what is known as the Western Oregon Unit, out by Wadham Lake and the Pacific Crest Trail. He decided he would scout around the area for a bit to find a good draw he could nestle down into the next day. As he was an hour walk from camp when he ran into two other hunters. A father and son team that usually hunted the area with black powder rifles. They waved him over and warned him that the night before they had stumbled upon a bunch of deer down in the valley and had shot a nice-sized 6-point buck, only to wake up the next morning to find it had been carried off by something. They warned that a bear was probably wandering around down in the valley and to be careful if he decided to hunt the deer there. He assured them he would be and thanked them for the tip-off and headed back up the trail to his camp, having decided he would hunt the valley. My grandpa spent much of the next day hiking down into the valley. It had been a full moon last night, so the deer had all night to graze and would most likely be spending the day bedding down in the tall grass or tree clusters. Around mid-afternoon, he had reached the bottom of the valley and had found signs that the group of deer was still in the area. While wading through some tall grass, he spooked a lone forked horn. It wasn't much, but as it was getting late, he decided to make the shot and dropped it at the edge of the clearing. He field-dressed the deer and managed to hang it up between two trees in a makeshift camp he had made near the edge of the clearing, but deep enough he could no longer see the field. He built a fire and gathered enough firewood to last through the night. My grandpa had dozed off next to the fire, only to be awoken by a large crack. He bolted upright to see night had fallen asleep, and across the fire sat a large creature. It had a massive fur pelt draped over its body. The creature's face was that of a withered, tired old man with a long gray beard. His eyes a bright orange color like the color of a butterfly. He was massive and sat hunched on his feet, staring across the fire at my grandpa, who sat staring back. They sat staring at each other for hours, until the fire began to die. The creature's stare never left my grandpa, but as the flames shrank, the creature slowly leaned over the fire, his mouth opening, revealing bear-like teeth. My grandpa quickly threw another log onto the fire, and the creature sat back, still staring into my grandpa's eyes. As the night went on, my grandpa started to become tired and began having trouble keeping his eyes open. He closed his eyes only for what seemed like a second, but when he opened them, the fire was dying. The creature was leaning over the fire, smiling, almost on top of him, when he quickly threw another log on. The creature sat back on its haunches, its stare intensified. They continued the state for several more hours, until the creature finally broke eye contact and looked to the sky. The sun was cresting over the mountains. It stood up, walked towards the deer which hung between the trees, untied it and threw it over its shoulder. The creature then turned and gave my grandpa one last hateful stare before it returned to the remaining darkness of the forest.
Delivery driver, deliver goods to restaurants. Go to a restaurant on the east side of the river. Creepy old building, long stairway down to basement. Creepy basement, creepy door in the middle of the stairway, 2. Unloading goods in the basement one day. Hear female softly sing. A little startled. Thought it was someone else, or maybe sound traveled. Realize I'm the only one in the basement. Only one prep cook upstairs, male. Hum to myself, pretty much throw the delivery in place. Run upstairs. Prep cook says I look startled. Tell him that the basement is creepy. He proceeds to tell me that there are really 2 official basements and 1 unofficial one. Back in the 1800s, the building was a mortuary. First basement was embalmed, second storage. Prep cook walks down stairwell, opens door in middle of stairwell. Dilapidated crematorium inside. Eventually, the building becomes a saloon. Unofficial, third basement part of Shanghai tunnels. Apparently, Shanghai tunnels are on both sides of the river. Although the building is relatively close to the river, the prep cook tells me the tunnels extend much further than the river area. Creepy shit. It's now a bank.
I'll be the first to say that all this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a freaky thing and can play some pretty trippy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me that in life, you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father self-ended and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog and headed up in my dad's car, that he had willed to me, to the cabin. Now this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we were not using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarms, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. This has nothing to do with the coming story, but felt the need to mention it anyway. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal and nothing out of the ordinary happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, and the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. Had already stocked up on food, cigarettes and liquor, so I was pretty much shut in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs, PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. The bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Open doors to dark rooms always creeped me out. Anyhow, the 3rd day came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight, by the way, and he also since passed, playing games and watching DVDs. That day it was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days I knew that no one was currently staying there. Gave enough background and am going to jump to the weirdness. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright. Whatever. The prints lead away from my cabin and they disappeared in the snow towards the dense part of the trees, disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around and decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a standstill, listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent. I was kind of freaked out, and could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only, he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier. But he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go to where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright. Maybe there are forest animals out there that he wants to chase down. But fuck this. Did not want to chance anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride. So it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright. You know what? I'm a tough guy and at the time considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. Fuck it, right as soon as I was outside I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Must have been all in my head. What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It was squatted on one branch and its arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it. Fuck me. What the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night I heard light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door. But at the same time I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was. Passed out eventually and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non-eventful and nothing else out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have been all in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, so I was pretty fucked up from all the drama.
I was once told a story by one of my grandmother's friends about the Oregon Portage Railway. The railway had been built for some time at the point this story takes place, but it had been decided that the railway wasn't long enough and more tracks should be laid down. A relative of my grandmother's friends had been brought on to work laying down tracks. The work was hard, but it went smoothly without any hitches until they had reached the 3-mile mark. Earlier that day they had rounded a large bend when someone claimed to see what looked like a group of large men sitting on a hillside off in the distance. The report was made to the foreman, who worried it might be bandits looking to steal equipment or rob or murder an unsuspecting worker. The work team camped directly beside the tracks that night to prevent any mischief with the equipment or tracks from taking place. It was common that before bed the workers would sit around and drink alcohol that was supplied to them by the company as they relaxed from the hard work of the day. Well into the night the workers awoke to what was described as the sound of wood exploding. In a rush the workers ran out to discover the storage lockers for the food and alcohol had been smashed open, the bottles broken underneath several large rocks. The incident was written off as loose boulders until the discovery of large footprints the next morning. This was the beginning of the strange events that would plague the rail team for the next week. As the week progressed onward, reports of strange hoots and yowling kept the workers awake at night. Every morning the workers would awake to trees which had been uprooted blocking their paths. The progress had slowed to a crawl. By the end of the week they had reached a massive rocky outcropping that had been hidden deep underbrush and trees. It was decided that they would dynamite the area, and for the first night the workers slept uninterrupted. The day they dynamited the rock was the last day that a team of men would work on the railway. It was said that after the rock had exploded, sharp, shrill screams filled the woods and mournful howls. The workers became terrified, convinced the rock had been haunted. Some even left right then. After the commotion, the remaining crew began to clear the rocks from the area, discovering in the process what was said to be the ruins of a burrow. They found grass and pine branches packed against a rocky floor, all of which was removed and thrown aside. The day was spent clearing the blast, laying down track over what had been the massive rock. That night the workers awoke to the sounds of boards breaking and snapping, metal banging against rocks. Too afraid to step outside the tent they huddled together inside, waiting until morning. When the workers stepped outside the tracks had been destroyed. Most of the equipment and lumber had been thrown off the side of the hill and into the river. The foreman was missing.
So I've been reluctant to tell this because it's hard to amass everything in words, and reliving the experience, much like the other Anon who posted, makes me come to tears. But I have enjoyed reading the others' experiences so much that I will add. There's an old legend in Oregon about a rural town called Lafayette. You can Google it as well if you would like. The story is basically about a woman suspected of being a witch and being hung because of it. Yet just before she was hung she cursed the people of the town for this persecution and said that the town would be burnt down 3 times over. The town actually has partially been burnt 2 times to this date. Rather it be through arson or the curse, who knows really. It is said that her son buried her in the Lafayette Cemetery, and if you go there you can see her walking around or standing in the cemetery. It is also said that if she sees you she will attack and leave scratches across your back, driving you out of the cemetery. Upon first hearing this amongst friends, I thought about how great of an urban legend this is and how I want to go out to Lafayette and spend some time in the cemetery just for the experience. My friends agreed, and some weeks later we looked through maps to see where the cemetery was located. Little did we know there were 5 cemeteries in Lafayette built since then. 4 of them weren't even on maps and were just off roads leading to cemeteries on the outskirts of town. Regardless, we set out to just have a creepy fun night. We drove out to Lafayette. The path there is on multiple 2-lane roads, often extending through miles of farmland where you don't interact with another car for miles. We passed through the main street of the town in less than a minute. The population there is about 3,700 or so. We then drove to the only cemetery highlighted on any map we found. Nothing out of the ordinary really. Just another rural town cemetery, beer bottles from kids drinking on a Friday night. We spent a little time exploring the cemetery and didn't hear or experience anything, not that we thought something was going to happen. But you want to be respectful when doing something like this, ya know. You want to be creeped out and hear or see something. Sadly, we didn't. So time elapsed and we decided to leave and drive on the outskirts of town to see if we could find anything. I am physically tearing at this point as I write this because I'm remembering what happened. So we drive on the outskirts of town for about 20 minutes trying to find another cemetery using map layouts on our phones so we don't get lost. Eventually we drove by a forested area and there is a closed locked gate amongst all of the trees for no vehicle entry. We decide to say fuck it and go around the gate. The pathway is lit enough by moonlight to follow it, but we carry flashlights anyway to help guide us. The hike took about 10 minutes to get to the end of the pathway. The pathway is also on a non-steep hill, progressively moving upwards for the entirety. There is another tall gate at the top of this pathway with a sign titled, "I shit you not, Lafayette Cemetery 2." We enter the cemetery, which is really just a group of trees within the middle of a clearing. The graves are very old and non-legible for the most part. They are shifted, due to water erosion and being on a slight hill. So some sit higher than others on the grass and nothing is really level. There are some standard gravestones and other flat graves on the ground. The whole environment is much more unsettling to us due to basically stumbling on this out of nowhere. My friend pulls a homemade Ouija board from his backpack. I had no idea that he had it in there and was reluctant to really do anything because at this point the environment was really unsettling and I was a little creeped out. I keeled to peer pressure from the 3 others that I was there with and we began to Ouija. We set the board on top of a flat grave and made contact with a spirit and asked it if it was male or female. It was male. We asked its name. It was John. My friends began to poke fun at how boring this spirit was and started asking it about which back scratch. The replies weren't conclusive. It just spelled random letters and counted backwards from 10. The piece then moved a bit faster around the board. The friend who created it told us that we shouldn't let it fall off because that would be bad. I don't even know if that's true. So we forcibly moved the piece to end, and was done with it. At that point I was more creeped out, although I hadn't truly seen or heard anything. My friend, knowing that I felt this way after the Ouija experience, looked at me and bolted into the darkness. He didn't have a flashlight and knew it would scare the shit out of me, which it did. I immediately was worried that he could fall and trip or hurt himself in the darkness and we wouldn't know, so I took my flashlight and went after him. I told the other 2 friends to stay there so I could find them back at the site through voices. I walked swiftly through the clearing outside of the forested area looking for my friend. Looking around to check where he could have ran to. I'm pretty freaked out, so my pace is fast, and as I'm looking on each side I slam my body into something and take a step back. It's the friend that I was looking for, but he doesn't seem to be fazed by me running into him at that speed. I ask him why he fucking ran off from us, and tell him how stupid his was. He doesn't respond as I am looking at him facing away from me. I immediately think he still wants to fuck with me and tell him to cut the shit and let's go back. This X-hang and the previous one happen in about 20 seconds. He still doesn't respond and I begin to feel that something is wrong. I come to his side and look at his face with a flashlight to see that he's frozen in fear. I adjust my face to the direction that his is in and see a moving lit apparition on the outside of the clearing within the forest. Moving, as if floating inches above the ground. I begin to try and fathom what the fuck is going on as I too am now frozen. I don't know how much time elapsed as we both stood there, but as soon as I came back I knew that we should run. We ran back in the direction I came, never looking back, frantically yelling the names of our other friends. Hearing them, we were directed back to the forested area in the cemetery. We hopped the fence, rushed them back down the path as fast as we could, got in the car and drove off, telling them the entirety of story of our experience as we were on our way back home. The drive to our town is about 25 to 30 minutes, and as I said before, the drive is on 2-lane highways and roads through miles of farmland. It was just past 2 a.m. and we didn't see a car for miles until we suddenly saw police cars and an ambulance blocking the road amongst all the farmland. The cop ushered us by and all of us looked to the side of the road for what they were there for. Apparently a car had crashed into a ditch on the side of the road. There were 4 members within the car, 4 body bags laid just outside of the ditch. I have no idea if this is affiliated with our experience or if it is just a coincidence. We said nothing on the way home. Neither my friend nor I felt any scratches on our backs after the experience. But the next day I did have physical marks on my back from it. They are scarred and haven't gone away.
Route 99 south out of Portland, snakes down wine country, going through a few towns, hills, and forest. A few urban legends about haunted accident scenes, Indian burial grounds, the usual Pacific Northwest fare. So here one story about a haunted spot on 99 northeast of Newburgh, where a supposed family were all killed when they were hit and run in their minivan by a semi-trailer. So decide to research it. No accidents on 99 I can find match up with the story. Seems like a complete myth. But locals about Newburgh and Middleton I know separately tell somewhat similar stories, and agree on a fairly precise location. No idea why, but seeing the site fills me with both a feeling of spoopy, but also needing to see it, a drive to understand if there is something about the place fueling the story. So, a little stoned, and having shit to 2 at 2 a.m., I rode out there on my bike. I mean, 99 has a bike lane most of its run. So it is not as crazy as it seems to be on it with a bike. Get to spot, a typical divided highway set up. Also you can see traffic signals and lighting about a mile down one way, and a mile and a quarter down the other, as it is a higher point on a bend in the road. Both lighted intersections are on traffic control, and you can see them give 99 a red light, if they detect a car waiting to turn onto the highway and nothing coming on it for a bit. Going about on the side of 99 headed south toward Newburgh for a bit. Checking over the site, with 4K white LED lumen headlamps on, and various red blinker LEDs going on my bike, and my backpack. No cars passing, which is odd, because even though it is late, traffic between Portland and Salem is still fairly consistent at all hours. So do not see shit, no signs of a previous accident on the guardrails, tree line, drainage ditch, etc. Just dark as shit, and seeing I shine from the occasional deer as I look toward whatever sounds of moving I hear. Decide to check out the northbound side, and go to the turnabout to cross the highway. About to cross the northbound lanes, with fully lighting equipment on and working. Can see nothing has gone through either of the nearby intersections. Suddenly hit with the sound and fury of a passing big rig. Horn blares, tires kick up dirt and pebbles, air desperate to get out of its unaerodynamic way blasting me like a cold wind, and even though we are near drought with no measurable rainfall in recent weeks, the air has a chilly dampness to it like it was suddenly winter. Then realize, the asshole trucker had no lights, no headlights, no working trailer lights, jack and shit. Feel furious about how he near fucking killed me, also amazed he can see anywhere he is going, as last I hear is the engine revving with a gear change. Get across lanes to northbound bike path. Rattled by the close encounter with a truck, as I bike slowly down toward the intersection. See the light stay green for 99 the entire time, despite 2 cars waiting there to cross, yet I am the only thing stirring on 99, and the traffic management sensors do not react to bikes, only motor vehicles. Suddenly feel very confused, then even more rattled. Where the fuck did that rig go? I never saw it cross through the lights of this intersection, and I did not see or hear it heading further down 99 the entire time I rode downhill to this intersection. Also no, it did not loop back around as I didn't hear it, and there is nowhere to have turned a rig like that around on the road here anyway.
Last night and the night before at about 9 p.m. after I'd gone to bed, my mom has been seeing weird lights or objects in the sky. She describes them as sparklers or translucent globs in the distance. I've been trying to get an impression of them by drawing them on the computer, but no progress yet. She says they look like fireworks, but they would have to be a new kind of firework because nothing she's seen before does this. We're going to call in this morning to see if anybody knows about these things. I haven't seen them myself, but there's a few reasons I don't think this is just July 4th drills. Yesterday on my way to work, I walked past a puddle of purple gelatin goo by the side of the road. It looked shiny and weird, and I thought it might be connected, so I scooped some of it up and put it in the Tupperware container with my lunch. When I opened my lunch a few hours later, it was gone. The goo had disappeared into thin air without leaving a residue or anything. I felt stupid and should have snapped a picture, but I thought it was something I could keep and research later, but it actually disappeared.
In middle school, so like 12 to 13. Just move into a new place. Kinda crappy duplex, infested with fleas, all vegetation dead. But mom broke a deal with the owner to get the first 4 months rent free plus half of the asked rent cost for the rest of the time if we deal with it. Cool. My 19-year-old uncle is also moving in with us, after a shitty home life decided to live with us. A couple weeks go by, mom gets a place livable and we start unpacking. Previous to this we had kept boxes of stuff we didn't immediately need in the new place's garage. Uncle starts unpacking and putting stuff away. I'm a lazy shit, so I decided to wander around the house checking stuff out. In garage there is a loft for storage, and a rickety wood ladder mounted on the wall to get up there. Climb up. Loft full of previous tenants' shit still whatever, might as well snoop. Boxes lined up against a far wall, a bed frame set up but with no mattress. We found out later that the other people got kicked out for hiding a family in the loft who were not paying rent. Some smaller boxes in the middle, open. Full of old porn mags. Some photos of a family, looked 70s-ish, and various other boring knickknacks. Decide to tell mom about all the shit up here. Mom says she'll check it later. Now, for reference for the rest of this, my uncle is a hefty guy. 300-ish pounds at the time of this story. He couldn't climb up the ladder, and even if he managed to get up there the loft was too old and shitty to support him. Anyway. He's going through his stuff and a manila folder with his Idaho stuff is missing. All his important shit. Birth certificate, social security card, checkbook, disability and vet benefits paperwork. And he's like, WTF. We searched everywhere, but couldn't find it. After a couple weeks he just shells out the cash to try to replace everything. Meanwhile mom never gets around to checking out the loft. Be several months later. We got too much shit. Mom says to help her put some extra stuff up in the loft. Fine. We go up there. Mom expects less stuff to be there already, gets all pissy and makes me help her take boxes down to make room. Start moving boxes away from the wall. After a bit I see a hinge. WTF. Move away all the boxes. There is a small door, probably 1 foot wide by 3 feet tall. Fuck that. Yell at Mom to come here. Mom freaks out because what the fuck? We pry it open with a crowbar and help from her boyfriend. It's just a long crawl space kinda thing. The walls, floor, ceiling are all covered in caulking and insulation foam stuff. Mom shines a flashlight in. The inside is about 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, and goes back about 15 feet to 30 feet. Wait. Mom says WTF is that in the back? I look up. In the very back, taped to the furthest wall, is the goddamn manila envelope, with his fucking name printed on it and everything. I'm the only one who can fit in the door. Mom tells me to get it. Nope the fuck down from the loft. We never ended up getting it. We still live in the shitty duplex after 6 years, and I still can't look up at the loft when I'm out in the garage. Fuck that. Okay, here's my Ouija story. Be several years later. Be 15. In my shitty scene, goth wannabe phase, think Ouija boards are cool and edgy. Mom get me a shitty glow-in-the-dark board from Walmart or some shit. Uncle is into spooky stuff too. We are both stupid and decide to use it one night when my mom is out. Ask some basic shit. Are there any dead people here, spirits, blah blah. Says there is one. Ask its name. Steve T. Okay buddy. I'm starting to get just a tiny bit scared, but think maybe uncle is fucking with me. We are getting drinks and hear scraping sounds from the room the board was in. Go back. The planchette is moving by itself. Fuck that. Uncle tells me we have to keep using it until the spirit says goodbye or it will get angry. God damn it. I am too much of a goddamn baby, too spooky for me, so I say fuck no. Uncle goes outside and throws away the board. We decide to stay up and watch movies to keep our mind off of it. This whole time Uncle never leaves my side, does not go to the bathroom or anything, only goes out to the garage to smoke. We decide to go to bed. Uncle goes into his room. Not 5 seconds later I hear him yell and he runs out of his room. I ask what's wrong and he says he doesn't want to sleep there. We camp out in the living room but I stay up all night tossing and turning. Again, Uncle never leaves my side, only went into his room for that 5-second period. Next day, Mom gets home. Uncle tells her what happened, tells her to go look in his room at the windowsill. I go with her, curious. On the goddamn windowsill, in deep, deep cut marks, is carved Steve T. Fuck. That. My uncle didn't sleep in his room for weeks, and was really nervous and pale the whole time. After a couple months I was cleaning out a closet and found the goddamn board. Still in the packaging, unopened.
I have some personal stories that have happened throughout my life. I'll go ahead and start with the first one that ever occurred to myself and my family, and if anyone's interested I'll post the rest. When I was a child, not even 4 yet, my family lived in a small house in Portland, Oregon. It was very much a standard 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 level home. When you walked in the front door, to right was the living room, past that and forward is the kitchen, to the left was a small open area, and past that was the hallway with our bedrooms and bathroom. My bedroom was the first one, and that's where my story starts. I used to be plagued by night terrors. Anything and everything a young child could be scared of or have a nightmare of, I had it. It didn't help that my mother and father were both horror film junkies and would watch scary movies around me, so this just added fuel to my nightmare fire. The thing that terrified me most would be the thing I would dream about that night. It got so bad I would end up leaving my room and sleeping on the living room couch or with my parents. I know this sounds cliché for a child, but it gets a little bit weirder than that. My father or mother would sometimes lay in bed with me in hopes of getting me to calm down and sleep in my own room for the night, and this is where a pattern forms. If my mother slept in my room, she would sleep just fine. However, if my father did, he would be plagued by the same nightmares I endured, his greatest fears at the time realized in his dreams. This pattern extended to my cousins as well. Female cousins would sleep just fine, male would have terrifying nightmares. This cycle continued the entire time we lived there. Eventually we moved out and were talking to neighbors. Evidently a young couple lived there prior to us. They ended up in a very heated argument one evening, and according to the neighbors we spoke to, they never saw the girl again. The boyfriend, however, soon began renovations on the house. I bet you can guess where, right where my bedroom had been.
Back in the winter of 2001, my youngest son and I were on our way from Boise, Idaho to Medford, Oregon. We had taken a car trailer to his old place in Boise in order to haul his non-running Jeep to his new place in Medford. We hit an area of heavy snow in the southern Cascades around 2 a.m. It took 45 minutes or so to get down the mountain. We had, of course, been drinking coffee to stay alert. About 25 miles west of the pass, it became obvious that the last few quarts of coffee had to be drained. We stopped at a wide spot in the road near a summer tourist haunted, deserted in winter. There is a gas station and ice cream joint on the west side of the road, closed this time of year, and no town or settlement within 30 miles. This is tall timber country, and unsettled. Across the road is a small parking area for the ice cream joint. It is paved and about 200 feet wide and 80 feet deep. I pulled in, and as I stepped out with .45 on hip, it occurred to me in a flash that grabbing the 590 Mossy would be good. As we walked to the far end of the area to be well off the road, the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood on end. The area directly to our front was open with a depth of 50 yards and a width of 100 yards. The night was clear and cold, 8 to 10 inches of snow on the ground, and with a moon almost full, so we could see quite well. While standing and taking a leak, with sun about 15 feet to my right, I saw, as if springing from the earth in front of us across the open area, 10 or 12 creatures moving rapidly back and forth in sort of a thatch weave pattern. These things, not human men, were close to 7 feet. Tall, thin, bipedal with long arms, medium-length gray fur, and damned fast on their feet. I brought the shotgun up and slid the safety off, as Son was drawing his .45. I don't know if I can adequately explain the overwhelming feeling of menace, but here goes. I had been operating on pure instinct since I had stepped from the pickup. The rotten feeling hit me a split second before the things arrived. The feeling, instinct, was that we were prey, and subject to Avery bad death, and to be slaughtered and eaten. Not a logical process, gut feeling, and massively overwhelming. As they were moving about in front of us, more appeared and mixed among them, all the while running about fast in front of us. Son and I were backing toward the truck. I would not present my back to them, and some of them peeled off right and left in an encirclement movement. They were rolling in fast from the sides now. I could smell and feel their presence. We got to the truck loaded on adrenaline and ready to kill, as we both knew we were in grave danger. We piled into the truck, locked doors. I had keys out and ready. As my butt neared the seat, I had the engine lit and trans in gear and gas pedal mashed in one motion. Adrenaline is great stuff. As we fled, yes fled, something very close by let out a ululating scream of rage and pain. I believe one or more of the group had gotten really close to us in their pursuit, and I ran over the foot of one of them. Yeah, they were that close. We rolled onto the highway and I told Son to watch the bed of the pickup as well as the trailer. He already was indexed to the rear with the shotgun. We hauled ass for at least 20 miles before the feeling of grave danger started to abate. The feeling that nailed both of us, as we discussed soon afterward, was one of being prey, and soon to be slaughtered and eaten. I am not easily led, and neither believe or disbelieve all the Bigfoot, ghost and werewolf stuff. In fact, I am skeptical. Son was speaking with a coworker about 6 months later who had grown up in Prospect, Oregon, about 30 miles south of Union Creek where the incident took place. He asked Jake if he had ever heard of any strange goings-on in the area. Jake went ashy white and pretty much retold the above tale. He says to avoid the place at night, a family friend, a 25-year-old retired cop not given to flights of fancy and an excellent observer, had a tale very similar from a year before. I told my wife of this event, of course. She looked at me at the beginning as though I had developed a third eyeball in the center of my forehead. That was from shock. She did believe me, but did not wish to hear any details. She said the tale gave her chills. Me too. As I write this, hair on the back of my neck and forearms is sticking up. I have not gone back to explore, and would not without a large group of shotgun and flamethrower-equipped men with me. Son and I are both sane, sober persons, and not taken to hysteria. We were very wide awake as things transpired. We saw and smelled what was there. As a sidebar, neither of us heard footfalls from the creatures. They were silent until I heard one as we were getting the hell out of there. To my knowledge, and I have researched, there is nothing that matches these creatures, unless one considers old legends and folk tales of were creatures. To conclude, I have to fall back on Elmer Keith's famous line, "Hell, I was there." Best regards, Mike M.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.